All right, I'm starting a new series. This is dedicated to my friend Howdy, who is a musician who plays bass, keys, produces. He does all these things, but until the other day, he didn't have guitar and never really tried learning to play. But because of his previous experience, he's got some facility, and I wanted to create lessons specifically for him. Let's talk about what we're going to go over today. Today we're going to be going over modes, bar chords, some hand exercises that will make both of those things easier that you can do even without playing the guitar, and some advice on tuning the guitar, as well as some general technique advice that I think will help someone watching this avoid some pitfalls I had to deal with and unlearn. So you'll see probably time markers in the bottom or around, so you can get to the part that interests you the most. Let's get to it.
If you made it this far, welcome to the Q Show. Gonna learn a thing, it's probably in the title.
This video is dedicated to the hope that anything I leave behind will benefit somebody one day, I guess. All right, let's talk technique. If you've never played guitar before, even if you played bass, you might use the pick sometimes, but for a lot of styles of guitar, the more popular ones in pop especially, you'll find the pick is pretty much always in your hand more or less, even if you're like doing hybrid picking. Pick. So let's talk about how to hold it. Generally speaking, you're gonna want to have your finger like this, your pick right there, pointing outward. You see how it's like an extension pointing up, then your thumb is going to wrap around it like this. Holding the pick like this is going to give you a lot of ability to have nuance in your hand. Now you're not going to be getting so into this right off bat, but this is something you want to do originally. I started holding the pick like this, which is a much more restricted movement, and having to unlearn this was a pain. As you play, you're going to want to make sure that you don't hit the strings too hard. If you hit the guitar too hard, it actually goes sharp. Guitar is not a perfect pitch instrument by any stretch of the imagination, and as you learn, especially chords, playing the guitar more softly is going to encourage good technique and also encourage you not being tense, and also help you hear it in tune more. And then you can apply aggression and stuff as a nuanced thing and not as a default. Something else to be careful of when you play, don't use your elbow to pick. Try and use your wrist and your hand. That's going to help with tendonitis and also just give you a little more control over the instrument in general. On the other hand, never have your wrist like this. If you are doing this as you play, that is squeezing on like, I guess like your nerve endings and whatnot, and that's going to cause carpal tunnel, especially if you're a very dedicated student to the instrument. You're practicing a lot. If you're practicing a lot like that, you're going to regret it. So a good way to help with that, besides like the general advice of relaxing, is to physically drop your arm down. If you drop your arm down, it gives you the opportunity to have your arm go straight out as opposed to like this. So watch, if I'm tense, I'm trying to play, I have to kind of do this to get my arm around, but if I drop my whole arm, my entire wrist flattens out a little bit. This is more or less what we're looking for. Ideally, your thumb would be exactly behind where you're playing. I think the focus on that depends on what your overall goals are. What you don't want to do is default to your thumb wrapping around the end here. You'll see me do a lot of that. I grew up, I started with a lot of Hendrix stuff, and old habits die hard, but you'll see when I play, my thumb generally will retreat to the back. So try not to do that. You want the thumb to be in the back generally. Whew. General thing to take home from all of that, the focus of reducing tension. When you first start playing, you're gonna find that your joints are a little tight and stuff like that. That's a lot of your body actually pulling from both ends at the same time because it doesn't know how to move your hand in that way. That's okay. With time, that should all lessen, especially if you make a dedicated practice out of like watching that. A lack of tension is actually what makes the fastest players play fast. So they're actually working less hard to play faster than you. Now that we've kind of covered general tension and technique, let's go over some hand exercises. This ties into the bar chords. So when you do a bar chord, or at least when I do, I find that my pointer finger will kind of roll outwards. So the joint will physically like roll on itself. And I find sometimes that's not something someone just starting out can do. So some ways that you can develop that technique without being even near your guitar, you can do this anywhere, is, I mean, you could do that. A lot of people can do this already, but this one too, this one 3, and then this is where it gets a little more interesting. You want to touch your knuckles and try and do those same movements. Most people will find this to be much harder, and that's actually closer to what you're actually going to be doing on the instrument because you're curling your fingers over and stretching. So developing these facilities will make it much easier to hit chord voicings and to voice out and to do scale runs, all that good stuff. For what it's worth, I have kind of big hands, but it doesn't matter. A lot of the guitar legends were like, not the largest people. You can have small hands and still play guitar. Like, there are plenty of examples. And there are some, and if you have really big stubby fingers, there are a lot of legendary shredders that are huge dudes. Like, I don't know how they play anything clean, but they figured it out too. So please don't let your physique be an excuse towards your technique. We just talked about exercises for stretching your hand for bar chords. So let's talk about bar chords a little bit. Things to keep in mind: playing a bar chord does not require that you press very hard. You'll find if you flip your hand over and just kind of relax your finger on it relatively softly, you can get a pretty solid bar without trying very hard. The things that make this easier for you is when you roll your finger over, you're actually hitting the bonier side of the finger as opposed to the fleshy underside. That's going to help a lot. You also want to make sure in general that when you press on a fret, it's right behind it, because that's going to be where you have to apply the least pressure to create a contact point. So you see, it's not that crazy. If you're just starting out, if you're like putting all three of your fingers and pressing extra hard, like, there's probably something else that needs to be addressed. It's not that you're too weak, unless, again, you're very young. Like, I started when I was like 8. Your hands are not fully developed yet. Like, that student may just have to develop some strength in their body first. That's okay and totally normal. But for anybody that's approaching young adult or adult of any like variety, gender, whatever the case may be, I don't feel it's a relevant thing. So, barring. Roll it out. The cool thing about bar chords is if you learn one, you learn all 12, because it's like G, A flat, A flat, B. This is great for reading chord charts and for writing in general. If you're producing a song and you know what the chords are, you don't have to figure out like what open chord it is, where each open chord is like its own thing. You can just use your bar chord knowledge. So you've got major, minor, minor 7, major 7, dominant 7, and that applies also against the A string. So you've got major, minor, minor, major 7, dominant 7. I'm not going to go over each of these individually. There are a ton of videos covering that topic. I'm also going to include some links in the description to chord charts that explain how to play each of these chords. Which brings us to my first assignment for the person watching this video. I want you to learn all of the basic bar chord voicings. So major, minor, all the 7s. I'm not asking for 6s. I'm not asking for any extensions, just those basic voicings. Because if you have that knowledge, you'll be able to read almost any chord chart with some relative confidence, as long as it's accurate. And that's cool. You'll be able to play songs without learning like the exact way that the original person played it, because now you're actually playing you're playing the song itself, not just like the literal part. Cool. Moving on, we're gonna get into modes. We're gonna get into the modes now. So, major scale, major scale. If you start the major scale from each of its places, it actually creates a mode. So if you're doing the boxes, you'd have Dorian. You'll have Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian. It's cool to know all of these modes because it'll allow you to connect ideas and lines as you play. So if you're in G major, you're not stuck in. You can go like. So I'm just kind of going all the way around. The knowledge of the modes allows me to kind of do that without worrying as much that I'm gonna hit a wrong note, because I know what the general shapes are. Also, if you're using the guitar as a production instrument, sometimes the most obvious way to play a lick is not gonna be the exact tone you want. Like going is not the same thing as. Each of those examples lends itself to each spot for different reasons. And every part of the guitar sounds different. So getting a general understanding of the whole neck is going to help you use it in the most useful way. This brings me to my second assignment. I want you to learn all the modes, and I want you to learn all 12 scales. It's not that deep. They're one fret away from each other. So if I say something like play B Dorian, you'll be able to go. And if I say, what key is that overall, you would know that's A major. With dedicated practice in a month, I don't feel like that's too much to ask. All right, so we got our 2 major assignments. I think that's enough for that kind of thing. However, I don't feel like it's too much to learn initially. And the last thing I want you to do is repeat the same thing over and over again. So let me give you some advice on how to take these assignments and expand on them. How you expand on them is going to depend on what you want to learn the most, and that's okay. We all have different paths as musicians, but I want you to be aware that you can always try something new and not just kind of be stuck doing the same scale. So when you're playing something like the major scale, of course, consistency and timing is important. Fuck. But you also want to work on dynamics. You could like start quiet and get loud. You can start quiet and get loud. And you can work on accenting different notes, or you can work on different accents or different timings, or doing triplets instead of eighth notes. These are all little things you can do on those same modes and scales that's going to encourage you to kind of grow as vertically as possible. We're trying to get all of these ideas out now so that you can expand on them passively. When it comes to chords, once you get a general facility of those bar chords, like, you can do palm muting. You can work on different like rhythms. You can work on muting each individual note. Fuck. These are little things you can do to kind of expand on playing chords. And so with those two assignments, which admittedly are not small, just thinking off the top of my head, I've thought of a bunch of different ways to expand on those assignments. And I think that does it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I would like to thank my Patreon subscriber. You could be the second one. We're still hunting for number 2. I feel like they're on the way. They're watching this video right now. And they were like, wow, a free guitar lesson? That's like $20 to $50. I should give that dude something. A cup of coffee a month? It's not too bad, right? Anyway, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. You can also follow me on these other platforms. Thank you so much for watching. If there's something that you had wished I had covered, feel free to mention it in the comments. Or if I helped you open your eyes to something different, feel free to mention that as well. I love hearing if I did something right too. That's all for today, and